Hello, I'm Graham Horton and welcome to part 2 of this new series covering the Panasonic Lumix FZ80 or 82 bridge camera. And in fact it'll cover the FZ200 and the 330 and also the 1000 and 2000 as well for some of the setups we're looking at today. Today I want to look at how you can change the way your images look by changing the photo style. If you're using the FZ80 or 82 camera in the IA or IA Plus mode, you're limited to just two photo styles. One is colour and the other is black and white, so a very limited range of what you can use the camera for. So I do encourage you to move away from the IA position, which also brings in lots more digital effects which can actually destroy your images. At least switch to the P mode, which then gets rid of the fully auto mode and puts you into a program auto mode. A lot more decisions you can make yourself rather than have the camera make them for you. If you're in the P mode, or preferably the aperture priority or shutter priority mode, you get access to the whole range of photo styles. After we've looked at the photo style setup, we'll look at how the camera meters for exposure. Generally the camera does fairly well, but there are some situations that will actually fool the exposure meter. Typical would be beach scenes or snow scenes where you would be typically underexposing your image and they appear to be grey, so you'll have grey snow or grey beach rather than the natural colour you'd expect. I'll show you how you can compensate for that. If you're not happy with the results that the whole area mode gives you, you can revert to what's called the center weighted, and that's good for portraits where it only takes the center of the image and uses that for the exposure determination. Or if you've got a particularly tricky situation, such as say you're shooting the moon where there's only a small area against a large black area, the spot metering can actually give you a perfect exposure if you put the spot over one of the craters on the moon, and that will give you the perfect exposure. So I'll run through all those modes. And then we'll look at how you can use exposure bracketing to ensure that you get the correct image, even if the lighting situations are changing and you're not quite sure how much exposure value compensation to apply. Using the bracket and exposure method will at least ensure that you capture one image with a perfect exposure. And if you want to use those images for stacking in to give you more dynamic range, then you could use those as well, but that's for another topic. So let me set up the camera and we'll shoot some scenes here at Liverpool Castle, which is in Rivington. It's built as a replica of the old Liverpool Castle, and I'll take you through some of the photo style setups and how we can change the appearance. So I've set up the camera now so I can film the back of the FZ80-82 camera, and you can see I've got a shot here of one of the ruined parts of the castle. It's in cross light, so we've got sunshine and shade, so that should be good for testing the contrast range of the camera. We're going to look at the photo styles, and to access that, if you're in the IA mode, as I mentioned earlier, if you press menu set, you notice that if we go into photo styles, you've only got standard or monochrome, which is a very limited choice. So if you go into the P mode and again go into photo styles, you now see we've got the whole range of photo styles available to us. But I recommend that you don't use the program auto mode, use the aperture priority mode, and then you can set that to what you need for your scene, or if you're shooting sports, then use shutter priority. Here I've got an extension of about 70mm, so my aperture is 5.4, and I can actually adjust that down to 4.3. So I'm going to set it down to 4.3. There'll be absolutely maximum depth of field in that shot for us. So, photo styles. Pressing menu set takes us into the record setup menu, and you can see photo style is highlighted there. If you press the menu set button, it brings you into the options now, so you can actually change things like the contrast, sharpness, noise reduction and saturation. So what I'm going to do first of all is take a picture with all those values set to 0, and we'll see how the camera responds. I'm going to use a 2-second timer so that you don't get any camera shake as we do that. So here goes the first exposure. So we've captured that exposure. You can have a look at that in the video. Now with the photo styles enabled again, one of the recommendations I make, if you aren't going to edit your pictures, you just want to put them onto social media or put them onto your web page, it's just to slightly increase the sharpness, maybe just 2 points, nothing more than that, otherwise you might notice sharpening artifacts. But what I do recommend is to use the noise reduction and set that down to -5, which effectively turns off noise reduction. You'll find that you get a little bit more noise, but you'll get more sharpness in the image. So let's take that second image with the new values. You can see there we've got a little bit more sharpness with that setting. So if we go back into it, If you want to increase the saturation, let's say it's a dull day and you want to increase the color saturation, then again you can increase the saturation. Or with the contrast, if it's an overcast day, you might want to increase the contrast. Here it's quite sunny and bright, so I'm trying to decrease the contrast to -2, and I feel that I can use that adjustment in my editing process if I want to add contrast back. So I'm going to set that to -2, and let's take that picture. Let's look at the other photo style. So that's the standard one. If we go up to the top line, we can then go into vivid, and again see we've got all the options there to set contrast, sharpness, noise reduction and saturation. So I'll leave those at 0, and let's just take one with a vivid setting. And again we'll take a look at the next one, which is natural. So this is more of a natural flat profile. And let's have a look at the next one, which is monochrome. So it gives us our monochrome setting, but in this one we can actually, this is our monochrome setting, and if we scroll down we've got contrast, sharpness, noise reduction, saturation, and then filter effect. So we can actually apply filters here. So if we scroll to the right, we can have a yellow filter which enhances the blues, an orange filter again which enhances greens, and you've got these various filters so you can actually improve the appearance of your monochrome picture. So we'll just set that to off, and we'll do a standard monochrome shot. And the next one, if I go back up to the top, is scenery, and this enhances blues and greens. So this is a good one for landscape photography. And again, you've got the options in there to change your saturation and contrast if you felt it necessary. Then we've got portrait, which gives a more natural skin tone, slightly enhances reds and gives a slightly softer appearance. So it's not really suited for this scene, but we'll take it anyway. And the next one is the custom. So when you set up a profile, so if we go back to standard, and we like what we've got here in our adjustments, you can actually save that as a custom. So we can save our setup that we achieved in the standard photo style. So if we quickly go back into there, you can see over on the left hand side the display button will actually save that image, and it will save it to the custom menu. So if I press display, it will now save that to the standard settings and say yes. Now if we went to the custom profile, which it switches to us automatically, you can see that those values have been set into the custom profile. So now we've taken a quick look at the photo styles and how you can customize them for your own particular type of photography. Let's have a look at how the camera meters for exposure. So if we go back into the menu setup, and there on page 2 of 7 of the record setup screen, you know metering mode is the second option down. And you can see if we press that, we've got 3 choices: whole area, center weighted and spot. So first of all, let's take a shot with the whole area. So it's going to take the whole brightness across the whole picture to determine what the exposure is. So let's just take that shot. So it's given us an exposure there of f4.3, shutter speed of 1/60th, with the ISO that I've set manually down at 80. So now let's go to the center weighted. So this is now taking a portion from the center of the screen, and it's given us the same exposure, which you'd expect because it's a very neutral tone. If we switch into the spot metering, then you can see in the middle of the screen we've got a small cyan cross, which is where it's taken the exposure from. So being in that neutral area, it should be giving us roughly the same exposure. 4.3, the exposure has gone to 100, so it's slightly longer. But if I move that spot into a darker shadow area, if I try to get into a darker area, you notice now the camera is saying the exposure is a 60th of a second, so it's measuring from a very, very small area. This is where you have to be a bit savvy as to what you're metering. So you want to look for something of neutral tone, which is going to be that grey wall, so that's going to give us the exposure of 1/125th at f4.3. So that is how the metering circuit works to give you the exposure. But if you find that your image is looking a little bit underexposed, and if I felt that shot there was underexposed, we've got what's called exposure compensation, and that's achieved by using the dial here on the top. If you press that in, it switches from the control of aperture in aperture priority or shutter speed in shutter priority. It changes over to allowing you to change the exposure value compensation. You notice if I go towards the minus side, the image goes darker, and if I go to the plus side, the image brightens. So you can use this to affect how the camera is going to display the scene. So if I want to make this a little bit darker to capture some more detail in the sky, then I'm going to go to -1. So again, let's take that picture, and that is going to be the image that you see in the video. Let's just change this back to center weighted. Again, the exposure looks about the same. So let's just take that picture. We can see more detail in the highlights, obviously the cloud. We can actually bring that up in our post-production and to increase the brightness of the shadows. So a typical example would be plus exposure value compensation for shots on snow. Normally the camera tends to underexpose on snow because it's in such an expanse of white that it wants to try and make that neutral grey, and it does that by underexposing. So you've got to tell the camera, I don't want it to do that, I want you to give me a normal exposure, and then you would dial in positive exposure. If you've got a lot of black in the central area, then you want to use minus to stop the camera from overexposing. So this is the iconic Lytham windmill, but unfortunately the sails are away for repair at the moment, so it doesn't look as good as it normally does, but it's still going to be a challenge for the FZ8082 because of the strong cross light on it. So we've got bright highlights and deep shadows. So this is a case where exposure value compensation might come into play because of the brightness of the subject against a fairly light background, which is the sky. So we're going to be using exposure value compensate for this shot, and it will be with +2/3 and with +1 to overcome the fact that the subject is white. So I'll take the first shot at 0, and then the second at +2/3 and the third at +1. Now I did mention that we could look at bracketing, and bracketing allows you to set the camera up to give a series of exposures at a predetermined sequence. So if we go into the menu and you go down to bracket, if you press menu set, bracket type is off. If you press it one more time, you can see that we can get into plus or minus exposure compensation. So we press that, and now it gives us more settings, which is the sequence. So we can go from 7 stops on either side of the correct exposure with 1 exposure value increment between each of those pictures, or 2/3 between each increment, or 1/3 between each increment. Normally I would go 5 and go with 1/3 of an exposure increment between each picture, and then you can set the sequence so it starts off underexposed and then progresses to the overexposed. So that is the sequence that I would normally use. Once you've set that, now when you take the picture, and again I'm going to use that 2-second timer, the camera will take those 5 exposures between the minus and the plus, and one of those will be the correct exposure, as you can see in the video at the moment. So that's it for today's video, and I do hope you're finding it useful. In the next part I'll be looking at the focus modes and which one to use for different situations. I'll also be taking a look at the 4K photo modes and how you can extract stills from them to capture the precise moments in the sequence of events that you're looking for. So until then, thanks again for watching, please do take care, and I hope to see you all very, very soon.